The Florida State University College of Law is renowned for creating great lawyers, but sometimes those lawyers can make a name for themselves outside of the courtroom. Take, for instance, Shannon Bream. She's a reporter and a correspondent and an anchor for Fox News in Washington, D.C. Her assignment, covering the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court. Shannon was back on campus recently as a 2011 commencement speaker, which gave us the opportunity to go prime time.
Whatever you're pursuing, I pray and hope that you will be the story and not just telling the story.
Well, Shannon, first off, what is it like to be living and working in the U.S. Capitol and covering the world of law and politics each and every day?
I really do wake up feeling blessed every day, and like my dad and I like to joke about, the fact that I get paid to do something I love so much, I really am so grateful because it's always a different day. There are always deadlines, there are always people hustling, whether it's through the Capitol, running to a vote, you're trying to snag a senator for an interview, or sitting in the Supreme Court and watching the 9 most brilliant legal minds in the country debate a case that will impact the entire country. Even when I'm over at the White House, I truly pinch myself every time they actually clear me in to work for the day at the White House. I'm sort of wondering, how did I get here? And so I still very much feel that way about my job every day.
Well, in your mind, what has been the most important and significant story that you've been able to cover?
I think from a legal standpoint, I think it had to be, there are a couple of cases that stick out in my mind at the Supreme Court. One of them is gun control, the Second Amendment. The Heller case that came down a couple of years ago, it really impacted the entire country, and the follow-up case since then. The Second Amendment is something that Americans have debated for decades. And maybe centuries, you could even argue, and the fact that the court waded into that, elected to go there, and in a very tight 5-4 decision found in favor of expanding gun rights for most Americans. It was a huge ruling, and I was so determined that day to be the first one to make it out of the press room, where they don't allow any cameras in the Supreme Court. You have to run down the street to your camera, and I actually wore tennis shoes that day because I knew we were going to get that ruling. I had a feeling, and I remember grabbing it in the press room, and it was about 100 pages of a ruling, and just running for the camera, determined I'd be the first one on. And I didn't have time to read it, but I looked down and I saw the justice who had authored the opinion. It was Justice Scalia, who is very conservative and a very big proponent of the Second Amendment rights. So before I even got on camera, I knew what the decision was, and then to flip through it as it was unfolding, that's always exciting. So that, I would say, is one of the biggest cases there.
Well, how do you prepare for a typical day? There has to be a lot of material you have to go through. How do you get ready?
Sometimes, if you're lucky, you know the night before what your topic is going to be, so you can try to track down lawmakers who may give you the sound bites that you need, the key players you want to get ahead of the game with them. Some days, if I'm doing a show, I know I may have 2 hours worth of topics, and so there's a lot of homework, and I start early, whether it's the debt ceiling or flooding or tornadoes, whatever it's going to be. If it's a longer form show, there's a lot of homework. We have great researchers, which is one of our secrets, in that you can put in special requests saying, I know so-and-so said this in 2008, find me the soundbite. Or what are the statistics on how many tornadoes have hit Arkansas last spring? So we have a lot of researchers that help us, and it's just a lot of reading, a lot of homework, a lot of feeling like you're in college every day, and just trying to cram as much information as you can into a day.
Well, the bulk of what you do is covering the U.S. Supreme Court and other law issues. So how did going to FSU's law school prepare you for what you do today?
I am confident in saying I could not do the job I do covering the Supreme Court without my law degree that I got here at Florida State. One of the biggest lessons I learned is that there are multiple sides to any story. Florida State hammered that into me through arguments and classes and research here, that even in my first year as a law student, the wealth of knowledge I gained about researching and understanding the court system and the legal system just put me on a path to be able to do my dream job and what I'm doing now. Without this law degree, I'm pretty confident in saying I wouldn't have that job covering the court.
Well, what are your memories, your best memories about your time here at FSU's law school?
It felt like 3 years of trying to survive, I won't lie. I mean, any law school, I think, is a difficult experience, but there are professors who stick out to me, like Nat Stern. We had a great constitutional class where we would talk about the Supreme Court and sort of role play and understand the justices. In that case, that class really sticks out to me because it is so on point with what I do now. But I was involved with moot court and took some really interesting trips with Professor Vandercreek, really sort of bonding with other students, and the roommate I had at the time was a lifelong friend because you're just trying to make it through.
Well, when you got out of law school, you used your degree for a couple of years in private practice, but what drew you to the world of television?
I'm a news junkie. I guess like a lot of folks who would describe themselves that way. I want to know what's happening. I want to be there. I want to tell the story to other people. I'd always had that in the back of my mind. I never knew if I'd pursue it as a career. I practiced law for about 4 years doing labor and employment law. And while it was a fantastic job, a great career, it was sort of this square peg into a round hole for me. I felt like you can go there and do a good job and enjoy the firm and the people that you work with. But if you have a passion to do something else, it doesn't feel like the right fit. And so finally, I had my midlife crisis, I guess, at 28, 29 years old and changed my career. But I feel so fortunate to have a perfect marriage of the law degree I got here at Florida State and being able to do what I feel very passionate about.
Well, everyone who's in television wants to make it to the network, but you had a very successful career in local television in Tampa and Charlotte and Washington, D.C. So how has the network compared to what your expectations were going in?
It's a different beast altogether. In the most positive ways, it's fantastic in that you had resources that you never had in local news because you're scrambling, you're shooting your own stuff, you're lining up your own interviews, you're basically producing everything and doing it all yourself, which is a fantastic education for doing anything else that you would want to do beyond that level. Because even if you're working at a cable network or somewhere else, a national organization, the fact that you can be so self-reliant and do so much for yourself because you learn to do it that way is a huge plus. But you do walk into another level of resources, of technology, of personnel, and you get to cover stories that take you around the world and that go into people's living rooms all over the country every night. And I mean, we'll literally meet someone in the airport who is a soldier overseas. I had someone stop me today and say, "Hey, we watch you on our base in Afghanistan." So to know that you're bringing stories to people all over the world is just, I still pinch myself.
So what does it feel like to be invited back as a commencement speaker at Florida State University?
A little overwhelming. I'm humbled that they would even think of me to come do this, but I'm so excited about the next generation of kids. I mean, they're graduating into a world that has significant challenges, but knowing that their whole life is ahead of them, hopefully I'll have a few words that will encourage or inspire them in the right direction, but just thrilled to be a part of it.
Well, you're used to speaking to millions of people, but when you do it, it's just through this one little camera. A little different when you're
Right.
live in front of the 13,000 people of the Civic Center.
Right, and no one ever seems to get that. They're like, "Oh, you do this on TV every day, it's the same thing." When you're telling other people's stories, I think it's one thing, and when you're trying to share some of yourself and your own insights and your own stories, I think it feels a lot more personal, you feel a lot more vulnerable, and you really hope, because it's such a special day for them, that you say something that will have a positive impact on them. So it's a different kind of pressure, I think.
But you've had plenty of preparation for something like this. Something that doesn't get a lot of attention is that you're one of the few people who have ever competed in both the Miss America and the Miss USA pageants for different states. How has that experience helped you with regard to the poise that's required for what you do each and every day on television?
I think most people, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, the time frame that I was when I did Miss America and then went on to Miss USA, I don't think at that stage in your life you have a whole lot of opportunities to be on live national television and to be asked questions and to try not to stumble, which I did trip. But I think it's sort of a sink or swim situation. You get thrown into something that's a very sort of grown-up responsibility, and you just try to make the best of it. And so I think you sort of confront your fears about being on stage and about talking to people, and makes you a little more comfortable, I think, than you would be otherwise.
So what's next for Shannon Bream? I know that the CBS Evening News job may open up soon.
Well, yes, the minute Katie Couric officially announced she was stepping down, I received many phone calls. No. You know what I'm really excited about? First of all, we have a political debate, the first one in South Carolina, coming up on Thursday, and I'm thrilled that I'll be a part of that and getting to ask questions of the candidates, and I hope it's just the first of many opportunities to cover the 2012 race. It's something I've always wanted to do, to cover a presidential race sometime in my career, so next year looks like it'll be it.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for making us proud.
Well, thank you. Always happy to be back.
That's Shannon Bream from Fox News, a graduate of Florida State University's College of Law. That's going to do it for this edition of Florida State University Headlines. If you or someone you know would like to join the FSU Alumni Association, we're a membership-based organization. The numbers at the bottom of the screen will help you in that endeavor. On behalf of the 280,000 FSU alumni around the world, I'm Scott Atwell. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.